So, hi, hello. I am Krissa Marie Bowman, and if we haven't met yet, welcome to my quirky little mind. I'm a hypnotherapist, an educator, author, and creator of Quantum Journeys Hypnosis and Quantum Journeys Hypnosis Academy, which is a client-led approach that combines neuroscience, hypnotherapy, and quantum healing, which really is just sort of a marketing catch-all phrase that could mean a lot of things. In my world, it means working with our clients' multidimensional consciousness. Anyway, my academic background pulls from applied psychology, gender studies, clinical hypnotherapy, spiritual hypnosis, and years of noticing, because I'm a natural born rebel, where conventional models fall short, especially when they reinforce outdated power dynamics that don't actually benefit the people that are involved in them. In this case, that would be our clients, the people paying us to help them. So if you're someone who's curious about doing things differently, about asking controversial questions, about maybe shaking things up a little bit here and there, then stick around. I think we will get along just fine. So thank you to Richard Nongard for inviting me to HypnotiCon 2026. And I will do everything I can to make sure he doesn't regret that. And I have a little prop. You guys ready? The name of the title of my talk is Who's Your Daddy? Who's Your Daddy? Rethinking Authority, Power, and Partnership in Hypnosis. But I know it sounds a little cheeky, maybe a little irreverent, but stay with me, because what I actually want to ask you is, who have you been unconsciously handing your authority to? And if we're being really honest, where might you be holding too much authority when it comes to your clients? I can't get my mustache to stick, so I'm going to take it off. But yeah, where might you be holding perhaps a little too much authority when it comes to your client sessions? So today, that's what I want to talk about. Not in a loud, obvious way, but starting to unpack some of the roles that we step into, maybe not always consciously, as we sit across from our clients. The subtle ways that the roles that we were raised with shape our sessions, our language, and our energy, and to not throw them all out completely, but let's just start to really interrogate them a little bit, gently interrogate them, because they shape our language, they shape the energy dynamic, and even in therapeutic change work, I would say especially in therapeutic change work, those old top-down hierarchies that are systemic in our culture, actually globally, I would say, can still sort of whisper their way in. And here's why I wanted the mustache, because I was like, yeah, you can actually trace it back before Freud, but he's probably the most famous daddy of them all when it comes to that sort of top-down hierarchical, I'm the expert, I lead, you follow approach, right? And so I want to just say, a lot of these dynamics are inherited. They didn't evolve naturally. And they didn't evolve by accident. They were designed. I would even say they were manufactured. Just like this mustache, which was manufactured with very low tech, an ink printer and a pair of scissors and some not very good glue. Roll right into the real reason that we're all here, which is rethinking who's in charge in our hypnosis sessions. So I want to also, before I get into all of the meat of that, just make sure that if there's anyone here that is not open to this, that gets highly triggered by the word patriarchy, this is an opportunity to leave now if you want. I certainly don't want to force anybody. And this isn't man bashing at all. This has nothing to do with gender at all. It has to do with systemic patriarchy. That's the top-down model. And I'm only going to use that actual word, the P word, maybe 3 times. It's not fully based on that. But this is your chance to dip out. No judgment whatsoever. I will not be the least bit offended. And if you think maybe I'm just full of baloney, I invite you to stick around, because I'm going to do a Q&A at the end, and you'll have an opportunity to tell me respectfully, I hope, that you think I'm full of baloney, and maybe you'll even change my mind, because I am open to that. And in fact, that's kind of the whole point that this presentation is about, to be able to update what no longer works when we find something that works better. Okay, so now we're going to dig into the meat of this. You guys ready? Back to these systems that I mentioned. The systems that are just sort of endemic to all sorts of industries and different paths in our society, tend to prioritize the ego of whoever's at the top, right? So in our case, in our situation, that would be the hypnotist or the hypnotherapist, the practitioner. Or maybe it's their branding or their method or their tool or their whatever, right? But it's there to prioritize and prop that up over the client. Because when you have a top-down situation and that's at the top and there's only two of you, where does that leave the client? Right? Below you. Not cool. And even though I'm sure most of us got into this line of work because we truly want to help others, not just boost our egos, these are the systems that reflect that sort of dominance-based model. It's hierarchical, it's vertical, and a lot of us don't tend to question it because we were just raised with it. This is the way things have always been, right? And so it almost seems like it's natural. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is and then give you some examples, and then also let's unpack it and then share some different ways of doing things. Before I talk about confidence, I do want to make sure that you understand that I absolutely believe that it's important to believe in your own training, your own tools, and your own skills, okay? I think that's true of any profession, right? When you find tools or skills that turn out not to be all that they were hyped up to be, or that don't work the way that you were hoping, or that maybe come with some risks that you don't feel are worth it, please don't be afraid to let them go, to make adjustments, even if you paid a lot of money for them. I see that age-old sunk cost fallacy entering into our industry a lot, where when somebody pays a lot of money for something, they're like, I can't let it go. I have to make it work because I paid thousands of dollars for this thing. No, if you need better tools, go get better tools. There's no shame in that at all. There's no shame in that. But whatever your tools, whatever your methods, your skills, your education, embodying competence is going to be so much more beneficial than just performing confidence with them, right? Confidence without competence is really just arrogance. I hate to say it, but it is, right? If you're just confident in yourself without actually being competent in your tools, well, I would say maybe best case scenario, it's arrogance, right? Because worst case scenario is we're working with the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I'll explain that in just a moment. But if you are trained, and I'm sure most of you already know what that is, maybe everybody does, but I'll just put it into my own words so it, we all are on the same page. But if you are trained to believe that the success of your sessions depends on your confidence level, well, let me just ask right here, right now, how many of you received that advice from your trainers? That the success of your session depends on how confident you are. Is it pretty much everyone? Okay. And now, follow-up question. How many of you have jumped through hoop after hoop after hoop in search of this elusive confidence? Okay. How many of you are still holding yourselves back because you don't feel fully confident? Go ahead. All right. Okay. Switching gears for a bit. How many of you feel absolutely confident at all times, no matter the situation, no matter the goal of the client, no matter who the client is? Anybody? Good. I was actually kind of afraid somebody would, and I was like, that throws everything else off. Hopefully nobody, because that's where the Dunning-Kruger effect comes in. I said I would sort of explain my take on that, but have you ever met someone who's just started learning something and then suddenly they think they're an expert? Like maybe they watched one documentary on hypnosis and now they're explaining your job to you. That is the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. It's a form of cognitive bias where people with very little knowledge in a certain area overestimate how much they know because they don't know what they don't know, right? And here's the flip side. You guys ready? Everybody that was like, I don't feel confident. The flip side is that people who are actually very skilled tend to underestimate themselves. They tend to underestimate how much they know because the more you know, the more aware of how much more there is to know you become. So the folks with the least amount of experience often portray the most confidence, while the people with the real training and depth are questioning themselves and walking that line of doubt. So I'm going to say, it's a little controversial perhaps, but throw out this confidence thing. Like, put it on the shelf for a bit. Your sessions, I know it's pretty whack for me to say this, but your sessions are not dependent on your confidence, okay? I would say this is especially relevant in a profession where confidence gets confused with competence all the time. And we see that in our profession. So I would like to name what's really going on here. It's performance. We are taught to perform confidence at all costs, sometimes even at the risk of not cultivating the competence that we need to appear unshakable, even when what we actually needed is just space to grow, explore, make some mistakes, get curious, and learn how to trust in ourselves and in our clients, which in my mind actually does come from curiosity, not confidence. If you make your entire session based on you being curious about how your clients are going to move through their healing journey and achieve their goals, then it's no longer about you and your confidence, is it? And then you're no longer at the top. You're holding their hand. Because healing work, real healing work, is not a performance. You don't need a spotlight or a script. You need presence. You need adaptability. You need integrity. Unless, of course, you're a stage hypnotist where I'm sure you have all of those things and you're also on a stage with a spotlight. In which case, please keep doing that, because our world needs entertainment and laughter and joy, and I do not want to take that away from anybody. And I think that can be just as healing as our, one-on-one sessions for sure. But I want to give you an example of this kind of top-down power dynamic. I'm going to give you a couple, but this is one that actually happened to me. Okay, where the whole premise was to prop up the practitioner's ego, while relegating the client to, actually not even having a voice in their own care in this case. I will not name names. Some of you might recognize who this might be, but I'm not saying anything. But I was in a training with a well-known instructor who proudly announced that he never follows up with his clients. Never. Not only that, he recommended that we don't either. Why? He said, if you follow up, I'm paraphrasing, but if you follow up, it suggests that you're not confident in your work. It suggests that it might not work. And then you could undermine the results of your work. And I was like, what? I'm sorry. What a steaming giant pile of horse poo that is. Because if our work is that fragile, that just checking in to see how somebody's doing is gonna destroy it, what are we even doing? Seriously. So I asked him, okay, if you never follow up, how do you know your success rate? And he actually said, his actual response was, again, paraphrasing, but it was more or less this: if they don't reach back out, I assume that means it worked. Because they tell me if it didn't, right? I was like, no. Have you met your clients, sir? I see that as avoidance wrapped in fragile ego. When I say, have you met your clients, who's coming to us for help? It's people that are already feeling somewhat disempowered, right? Most of the time. They're uncertain. They're already a little vulnerable. They're looking to us like we are this lighthouse in the storm. And then they're met with a giant ego performing confidence. Do you really think they're going to feel safe enough to say, hey, this just didn't really work for me? I mean, maybe a few, honestly, but most of the time, probably not. And hang on to your hats, guys. When I was in that class, when I took that class, I was the guinea pig and it didn't work for me. Guess what? I didn't tell him. I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to be the one person that caused a problem. I didn't want to be the squeaky wheel, So the thing that he was doing, that I was the guinea pig, and it wasn't because I was resistant. It's actually because I'm not a very visual person. And what he was doing was very visually based, but he also didn't check to see anything about me. If that would there was no, it was just, here's me and my method, and my ego, and you will do it my way. And it didn't work. And he doesn't know. To this day, he doesn't know that it didn't work. He assumes it did because I didn't say anything. So, yeah. And I think that happens more often than not, honestly. I was pretty surprised. I actually asked in a Facebook group, like, hey, how many people were trained to not follow up? I was so surprised. It was in a all women's group, but I was so surprised to find out how many women were still being, or people. This was indicative of people, but it happened to be a women's group. I'm looking at it as a small sample size of the whole population of hypnotists, though. But a lot of them were like, yeah, I was totally trained to do that. How about you? Were you guys trained to not follow up or provide aftercare? Because if you did, that would mean suddenly you're not confident in your work. Wow. It's just, I don't know. I'm kind of genuinely surprised that that's still being taught. And I'm also glad that I only ran across it once and I immediately sussed it out. I was like, what? No. This can't be right. I follow up with every client and I got a lot of repeat clients, not because they didn't get what they wanted out of the session, but because they did and they want something else now. Because we're not just two-dimensional creatures, right? We have all kinds of things that we want to work on. So anyway, I was genuinely surprised to find out that this is being taught as much as it still is, and that a lot of people in that group are still adhering to this. And if you feel like that is the way you want to keep doing things, fine. If you were trained that way and you're like, you know what, I'm comfortable with this, I don't want to change it, fine. But I do invite you to hear me out to the end of the talk. And I genuinely would like to hear why, and like, what is it that you're worried about happening other than what we've already addressed, right? I don't want to try to change your mind. I would rather hear your side. You know, we're all in this together. I want to know, like, okay, maybe you change my mind. But let's talk about those clients who do reach out, those brave souls, the few and far between, that we've all run across, right? Brave enough to say, you know, it didn't land. It didn't feel great. I don't really feel like I got what I wanted. And even though it doesn't feel good, you know what? Give yourself a pat on the back because you have created a space safe enough for that honesty. And that's huge when we're dealing with historically disempowered people, right? And yet we've all seen practitioners who do mental gymnastics to avoid that accountability. They'll blame the client, the timing, the astrology of the day, the moon phases, the anything at all, but themselves, or the method or whatever, right? But have you noticed that those same practitioners, when it does work, are the first ones to be like, hey, I did a thing. I did a great thing. Look how great I am. And you know, I feel like you can't really cherry pick like what you're going to take credit for. If you're going to take responsibility for your clients' wins, you got to take responsibility for when it doesn't work out so well either. Or meet them where they're at. Instead of taking full responsibility for anything, hold their hand and walk the journey with them. You're the one who has the tools and the skills to facilitate the sessions, but guess what? The wisdom lives inside of them. You don't know them better than they know them. I'm sorry. I feel like it's actually kind of unethical to cherry pick what you're going to take credit for, you know, right? Like it kind of needs to be all or nothing. But it does make us human. I would, however, like to suggest that when we run into that, to just remember that, yeah, even though it feels kind of icky, that maybe they didn't get what they wanted out of it, it's okay to just meet them right where they are and be like, yeah, what would you have liked? What were you hoping for? Because if you didn't address it in the pre-talk, if there's something that didn't get addressed in the pre-talk, that's probably where things fell apart. And then that's another opportunity for them to share with you what they really would like, or what they really were looking for, what they did need, or where the expectation didn't, meet for them. So it's just another opportunity for more collaboration. And if you're uncomfortable with that, I want to ask you something. What do you do when you need help? I do want to ask, do you feel comfortable asking for help? And not to put any on the spot. I just want you to think about it. It's rhetorical, but think about it. And do you have a hypnotherapist of your own? I do. I actually have a couple. I have two. So literally a couple. You've got four, Tamalinda? That's fantastic. Because if you're uncomfortable asking for help, well, I'm going to just share this quote. And I have it written down actually on my computer at all times. So I'm just going to read it to you. When you judge yourself for needing help, you judge those that you are helping. When you attach value to giving help, you attach value to needing help. The danger of tying your self-worth to being the helper is feeling shame when you have to ask for help yourself. Offering help is courageous and compassionate, but so is asking for help. Does anyone know who said this? Brene Brown. And it's true. And it actually totally describes how I was when I first started this whole journey. I was so much more comfortable being the helper and not at all comfortable being helped. And I attribute this 100% to that top-down, patriarchal, hierarchical perspective that we have kind of baked in, right? So here's another example of how that top-down hierarchical structure within, I would just say, any sort of healing profession, alternative wellness, even medical, does a huge disservice to us. Another place where power dynamics can sneak into the work. Abreactions. When a client is crying or gets visibly upset, something deep surfaces for them. And the practitioner, the doctor, the psychologist, the whatever gets really uncomfortable with that. I think, thankfully, most modern trainings are getting better about that. But the very first school that I went to was just like, don't let them abreact. That means you're doing something wrong. Happy, happy, joy, joy all the time. That's it. That's all you're allowed. Like 4 emotions out of 300, right? How is that helpful? But a lot of us were taught, even as children, that strong emotions are something that you don't share, something you don't express, something you don't let other people see, that they should be avoided or shut down. But that's also why we have clients seeking us out for help, because they were raised that way too. And now it's causing problems. And we have clinical wisdom, right? Hopefully we can see beyond this conditioning and we can help them to navigate out of this, to be able to express. So this whole like, don't cry, don't be dramatic, keep it together. When we bring that into the session, even subtly, like redirecting the abreaction or glossing over it or trying to keep things just like that toxic positivity thing, right? Keep it all like up here and on track and happy, happy, joy, joy. We risk reinforcing the very thing that wounded them in the first place. I'm going to say that again. When we don't allow our clients to abreact because it makes us uncomfortable, right? Because that's really what it's all about. We feel like, oh, did I do something wrong? That's my ego. Ooh, back in the driver's seat again. We risk reinforcing the very thing that wounded them in the first place. Because if a client finally feels safe enough to let something real surface and move and share it, what an honor. What an honor. We need to be able to hold that. And if we can't hold that, we are not helping them. We're encouraging them to continue to suppress or further suppress, as the case may be, because let's be honest, most of our clients are already experiencing symptoms directly related to having suppressed this crap their whole lives. We ourselves might even be walking around with some of those symptoms, right? And so we need to be able to hold that safe space for them, so that they can finally allow it to come up, release, process. So each of these examples are based on that whole top-down, vertical, like patriarchal structure. I think that's the fourth time I've said the P word. I'm going to try not to say it again. This doesn't mean that only men do this, by the way, in case that's something that I didn't clarify. It's not dependent on biological gender at all. It's a social construct. It's a social construct that creates societal systems that has nothing to do with what you got going on in your pants. These systems prioritize hierarchy and performance and certainty, like certainty over relationship, confidence over competence, as we were talking about before. assurance over adaptability. And you can find it in academia, medicine, science, economics, politics, as we know, hello, right? Who's your daddy is happening big time on the world stage. And of course, in the world of health and wellness, it's even on the side of spirituality that has become like that, huge for-profit side of spirituality. And there's some pretty amusing memes circulating around out there about this that maybe you've seen, and if you haven't seen them, like just think cult leader meets ladies man wearing a tunic and scarf and sandals. He may or may not refer to himself as a shaman or a guru. He may or may not be carrying a musical instrument of some variety designed for root chakra activation among young, attractive, feminine fans. But again, women do this too. Maybe just not in quite a sexualized way, but they do. They absolutely can be just as guilty of this top-down hierarchical approach. So again, it has nothing to do with the actual gender. It has to do with the structure. This top-down pyramid says, I'm the expert. I'm the leader. Therefore, you follow. And how can you tell who's engaging in this, right? Well, do they encourage a cult-like following? Do they discourage questioning their methods, their tools, their skills, their approaches? Do they become outright hostile or perhaps even litigious towards anyone who does question them? Those are just some ways that you can tell. And this little presentation of mine isn't just to call people out. It's actually to expand our awareness. I wanted to sort of lay out, here's the damage it can cause. Okay? So now we have an invitation to look at what we've inherited, often unknowingly, and ask, does this align with everything that I have learned and experienced? Does this align with who I am now? Is this really the best way to serve my clients? Is it possible that there is another way that might be more effective? And so where did all this come from? Let's zoom out, right? The top-down model that we're talking about. Doctor, patient, teacher, student, therapist, client. It almost seems natural because we were raised with it, but it's 100% totally made up. Someone somewhere decided this is how it should be because it benefited them, because it kept the wealth or the power or the resources concentrated where they wanted it. And then because they could, they called it the natural order. And because we had no say-so, we just accepted it, right? We built entire systems on top of this. Religions, governments, schools, and yes, even therapeutic modalities like hypnosis and hypnotherapy, all designed to sort of maintain control, reward performance, discourage questioning, avoid anything that might poke holes in it. And the thing about these systems, well, has the word system right in it. They're systemic. So everything they produce, including us, mirrors that structure. That's why we need to interrogate it. You want a crystal clear example of how we just accept these, that's just the natural order. I'll give you a few. The 40-hour work week. This wasn't designed for health or creativity or fulfillment. It was created. It was manufactured to maximize industrial output to benefit who? Not us, right? It was literally built to benefit the owners of the factories, the owners of all of the various the railroads, the whatever, right? And yet we structure our lives around it like it's some kind of natural law. We even tie our self-worth to this completely made up fabrication of how we're supposed to live. We guilt ourselves, we shame ourselves, when we're not living up to this completely fabricated, manufactured thing. Want something even closer to home that kind of starts to tie all this together? Think about how we've been conditioned to treat doctors like they're untouchable. They are the experts, the authorities. They have the final word. Even when we know something's off in our own body that we live in 24/7, we are kind of trained not to question the doctor. And women, you guys totally know what I'm talking about. I know every single one of us has been gaslit in the doctor's office. At some point, we've been told, oh, it's just anxiety, or something. But this dynamic, it didn't emerge from wisdom. It came from hierarchy. It came from supporting and benefiting who's at the top. And in that scenario, it's the doctor. And a lot of our industry inherited that same model because questioning the system doesn't benefit the system. Yes, I'm an Aquarius, but we're going to ignore the fact that I'm just like, I was born this way. I think that we should all start questioning the system. I came into the world that way, but like I'm inviting you to come along with me. Because that whole like, don't rock the boat, trust the expert, all that, it's just because something's been done a certain way for a long time doesn't mean it's the best way. And if a system requires you to silence yourself, suppress yourself, accidentally perhaps even silence and suppress your clients, if it makes you constantly feel the need to prove yourself, to never feel quite competent enough, quite good enough, quite, measuring up to your worth, then there's something deeply flawed with that, right? What we need is something that isn't a measure of success in that way, but rather looks at like how deeply can we connect? How compassionately can we serve? How ethically can we collaborate? When we unconsciously replicate these dynamics in our sessions, we stop being facilitators. We start being gurus, saviors, performers. We become the star of someone else's healing story. And that dynamic can sometimes create codependency. The client just hands over their power. The practitioner starts relying on the client's results for their own sense of self-worth. Codependency. And that's not partnership. When each session turns into points along a spectrum of bad to good, which unfortunately means now those clients become representative of those points of bad to good. And I honestly can't tell you how many times I hear from a colleague that they didn't think a particular session went well. And then later, because they're looking at it with a critical lens, right? What did I do wrong? Did I screw this up? Did I forget to do this other thing? But then they later hear back from the client that it was fantastic. Have you guys had that happen? Where you think, oh man, I totally flubbed that session. And then the client is like, that was amazing. And they might not say it right then. It might be a few days or weeks later and you're just floored. What? I totally thought I flubbed that session. Or conversely, sometimes we're like, man, I nailed it. I totally nailed it. I did such a great job. I didn't forget anything. And then later the client, maybe it's immediately upon emergence, maybe it's a few days or weeks later, but they're like, yeah, I just, I don't think it's not my thing. It just didn't really help, So clearly, not only is it not helpful to rate our sessions on this scale of good, bad, it's more like this. This is horizontal, vertical, good here, bad here. It's not helpful, but we're also really bad at it. We're not capable of actually clearly understanding what our clients are experiencing when we're caught up in our own egos, when we're caught up in the, am I doing good enough? Did I remember everything? And yes, I'm not saying kill the ego. Please don't. No, just heal that thing, okay? One of the clearest benefits of moving away from this old top-down model is that it removes the illusion that the practitioner is the one in control, which kind of flies in the face of that whole, you have to be so confident. But I want to ask you, have you ever run into people who are concerned that, I don't know if I really want to do hypnosis because I don't like feeling out of control. I don't want somebody else controlling my mind. And where do they get this from? From movies, TV, books, whatever, right? They're worried that the hypnotist might, talk them into robbing a bank or doing something embarrassing or, barking like a dog or whatever. But if we're actually meeting them where they are and working with them, collaborating, and if any hierarchy exists at all, it's actually putting them as the main character, not us, then that pretty much just neutralizes that concern, right? That fear. We reframe the session as a collaboration. Two people working together towards the client's goals. And this naturally builds more trust and safety, transparency. And rather than relying on these outdated assurances of you won't do anything that you don't really want to, which we all know is iffy at best, right? I mean, I know we still say it, but there definitely are situations where people have talked people into things that they really kind of didn't want to do. And I'm not going to go into any of that any further. But when we create real consent by sharing power, not monopolizing it, I feel like it just really maximizes the effectiveness of our work. Don't hang everything on confidence. Hang it on curiosity. Hang it on collaboration. Hang it on honoring the client's autonomy as an essential part of the healing journey. So instead of doing this vertical, top-down thing, entering into a horizontal relationship with them, an interdependent partnership as opposed to a codependent one. I know it's a little bit like I'm taking like everything we've been taught and went whoop. But when the practitioner is a facilitator instead of a savior, then it's based on authenticity and not performance. And so what does that look like? What am I talking about? What does this actually look like? It's trusting that some aspect of your client knows what they need better than you do. And you're entering into this sort of sacred collaboration with them with the understanding that you're just going to help them find it. It's not about you knowing everything. It's not about you playing God. It's about you facilitating a conversation with the client and the part of the client that already knows what they need and knows it way better than you ever could. Some people might call it their highest wisdom. Some people might call it their highest self. Some people might call it their superconscious, their big mind. And I actually, this is just me, I don't think it's a part of us. I think we are a part of it. But it becomes about listening instead of lecturing. It's about being open to pivoting at a moment's notice rather than trying to like stay in control of each step, make sure I don't forget this. You know, like we can't pre-plan these sessions in that way because we're going to be riffing off of whatever the client brings us, right? That's the collaborative part of it instead of the top down. If we're inviting the client to step into more of that main character role, then we're going to be the yes and person. You know, if we're looking at it like improv, we're letting them sort of lead the way, and then we're facilitating to make sure that like they get what they need out of it. But it leaves space for discovery. It's not about technique. It really is about just collaboration, curiosity. And most of all, it's about not hanging your hat on performance and this whole like everything has to be about you being the best hypnotist in the whole world, right? I think that can actually shut things down with the client to some degree, as we've discussed, you know, earlier. Because the primary objective is whatever's in the client's highest good, right? Not whatever makes your ego feel better. I mean, that goes without saying. That's why we got into this. That's why all of us got into this. And yet somehow or another, we end up still, you know, being trained to kind of forget that. But your job isn't to fix them, right? Your job is to open doors that they walk through. And I guess hold the light. That's your other job. You just hold the light so that they can find them, right? And not to get too preachy with you here. Is it too late for that? I've already been too preachy. I'm trying not to do it in a patriarchal way, though. But we're in the middle of a reckoning of sorts, not just in our field, but like across the board. The whole top-down model, I think, is being questioned across the board, whether you're looking through the lens of sociology or psychology or hard data, or even more like mystical frameworks, astrology, numerology. Every system right now seems to be pointing to the same thing, that change is not only coming, it's already here. We haven't seen change of this magnitude since the 60s. Things are getting shaken up, right? We're seeing more and more people challenge the structures that were designed to benefit those few at the top. And in response, those few at the top are pushing back pretty hard to preserve what they've got. It's going to be an interesting little choreography for a while. Not without some violence, obviously, which I'm not going to touch upon, but it's pretty heartbreaking. But the good side is that while that friction is uncomfortable, it's also a sign of great progress, and it's building communities. And the greater good is starting to matter more than just the individual personal gain of those at the top. And I don't think you have to be a psychic to see this, right? We're seeing it everywhere. Even world economists are talking about it on BBC, like just this morning. So it's showing up everywhere if you're willing to notice. And right here in this cute, cozy little container of the ICV's HypnotiCon 2026, we are actually part of that wave. So the question becomes, do we ride it into whatever's coming next? These new paradigm shifts? Or do we cling to something that's already crumbling? So yeah, this will give you a chance to sort of get a taste of what the work that I'm talking about is like in real time. Like when you have, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. It's a constant, I have to constantly like push back against my own, cultural programming. But luckily I came sort of hardwired to rebel against that crap. I don't know, I just got lucky. I don't think my teachers would say it that way though. Like growing up, I was always the kid that was in trouble because of it. But anyway, let's shift into the Q&A. And really, honestly, ask me anything. What you got? I'll look back through here too and see what some of the, yes, Tim, where are you? There you are.